Hi intro students, this is a introduction to your formal analysis paper. This paper is going to be due in two parts. The first part is an outline, and I'll have a template that I'll introduce here in a second that'll describe that outline. That's going to be due week 13, day 1. And then part 2 of that assignment is going to be your final paper. That's going to be due week 15, day 2. The outline is to be completed based on an artwork that you're going to choose, and I'll give you the criteria for what to choose and why. But the artwork you're going to select, you're going to do what's called a formal analysis essay outline. When I link to it here, you can see it's a very specific document that's going to ask you specific questions. I just want you to answer those questions and basically fill in the content based on your artwork. Okay. Now, the final paper is going to be a 2 to 3 page paper, double spaced with 12-point font. Don't give me a huge header with your name and the course number and all that stuff. I really mean 2 to 3 pages based on you having a title and your name on the paper, but not taking up a ton of space as that initial header. Included with this, I've given you an art criticism and formal analysis outline. This outline looks like this and kind of gives you defining terms for art criticism, for how to think about this formal analysis based on judgment and your opinion. This isn't a research paper, so you're not using the library or going and fact-checking anything. This is really about you pulling from the knowledge you've gained in the course and completing an analysis of an artwork based on that knowledge. So the first thing I want you to do, you have two choices. You can visit one of 2 museums in person to choose an artwork. So you can choose the Art Institute of Chicago and go to the Modern Wing. I've given you a link here to the visitor page that describes where to go, how to purchase tickets and all of that. Make a note that you're actually, if you're an Illinois resident, which you are, you're going to be getting a cheaper rate of entry to the Art Institute than if you were just a student. So keep that in mind. I think the student rate is $19, so it's cheaper for you to go and pay the Illinois resident rate. So make sure that you bring an ID that proves that you're an Illinois resident, or I think a couple other proofs could be a bill in your name with a resident address. Okay. Now, the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago, the MCA, is another choice. That one costs $8 for students to get in and is free for Illinois residents on Tuesdays. So if you went on a Tuesday, you could enter for free. Now the other option, and I don't actually think this is the better of the two options. I think going to the museum and experiencing the kind of cultural mecca of Chicago is a really good idea, especially for reifying some of the stuff that we're learning in this course. But you do have the option of doing a virtual visit to a museum. I want you to start or think of that virtual visit as a choice to kind of travel to places that you wouldn't normally be able to. So I wouldn't choose the Art Institute of Chicago, for instance, if you're going to do this virtual visit, because I think using the virtual tool is more exciting to travel to more far-off places. So you're going to use the Arts and Culture page that Google has created. And what they do here, when you land on Arts and Culture, you can see that you have kind of a selection of options here. You can choose by art movements, historical movements. You can go to collections. I'm going to select collections because this is going to give you a whole array of different institutions and museums around the world. Okay, so I would stay clear of just collections and start thinking about, say, the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. Now, one thing I want to show you that's really cool is, for instance, this one, this link here, or this image here, many of you might know as Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. One of the cool things about Google Arts and Culture is if you go to an artwork, many of them are photographed in an extreme high resolution. So if I select this icon to zoom in, watch this. We're going to zoom in and keep zooming. I'm going to go into I'm going to go into the moon. Check that out. Wow, that's incredible, isn't it? So this is as far in as I think it gets, but you know, it's totally unreal. And an experience of getting to this proximity to the painting that you would never be allowed to do in person, especially this painting itself. It's a very popular painting, and if you've ever been to the Museum of Modern Art and seen this painting, usually people are taking turns to get their photograph in front of it. But getting in front of it and getting as close as you can see here would be virtually impossible as a general patron or visitor to a museum. So that's one really exciting advantage to using this tool. So even if you're not choosing to use Google Arts and Culture or going to a museum virtually, I would definitely recommend coming back to this site or visiting the site and playing around with some of those features. Now, the second thing I want you to do is I want you to find an artwork. That artwork needs to be completed from the 1900s to the present. I want you to find one that purely intrigues you. So this is subjective. This is about what you're interested in or what catches you, okay? Before you read the didactic, and a didactic is a little text description of that painting, I want you to write down a few things. I want you to write down some formal elements of that work, so the size, the material, the design principles, colors, form, shape. I want you to note the medium, so is it a photo, a painting, a drawing, a sculpture, etc. And I want you to think about and determine if you can identify a style. So is it part of a larger show or context that it's in? Is it abstract, right? Is it realistic looking? Those kind of things. Once you've done that, I want you to copy the didactic, though, the actual didactic of the work of art that you've chosen. You can take a picture of it if you want. And if there's a didactic for a larger context of the show that's part of, so like an introduction to an exhibit that has many works of art, that this artwork that you've chosen is part of, make sure you photograph that as well, or write down what it says. A didactic looks like this, just so you have some reference. They usually look like a little plaque next to the artwork itself, and gives you the name of the artist, their living dates, the artwork's name, when it was completed, and then the material that was used, sometimes who gifted that artwork to the museum, and then a description, a text description. Now, this is an artwork for this. That was a didactic for this artwork, and what's pretty cool about that, oh, that's weird. Let's see if I can get out of there. If we can come back. Yeah, there we go. This is an artwork that's a drawing. It's an engraving, actually, and the engraving, let me see if I can get close. It started as it is a single line that spirals outward, and by the thickness and lightness of that line creates this image of what is, the artist says, is a render of the a depiction of Christ on a napkin. Okay, really fascinating. Anyway, neither here nor there, but let's get back to our presentation. And when you have finished visiting a museum, I want you to begin your outline, and I give you a link back to that original document. Now, I want you to note a couple things. Again, I want you to find an artwork that intrigues you. Don't question this too heavily. Just remember to surrender to the work like we've been talking about. See if this deeper look at the work inspires you to want to know more about this artwork. Find a work of art you would like to write about, okay? Begin by following the outline, that outline structure that I provided, and based on the information you collected in your outline, you'll be writing a formal analysis paper. Do not use outside resources for your paper. You don't need to go to the library, you don't need to use the web, any of that stuff. Draw from what you've learned in the class. Now, do not make this more complicated than it is. You are simply paying attention to your general interpretation of the work and how it relates to the artist's intention, what the museum thinks it might mean, and then how a larger world might receive that artwork. Okay, and receive it meaning how does the larger world understand that work and what it means. All right. Now, if you've got any questions, as always, please reach out, and look forward to reading your papers.